Good day, students. So for today's lesson, we will discuss resource mobilization, part 3 of our community profiling. So what is resource mobilization? So when we say resource mobilization, it encompasses the appropriate, efficient, and effective use of material support. For example, the use of equipment and hardware. Personal support, example the volunteer, and knowledge support, example the shared information, and also includes the articles of significance in applying resource mobilization during the calamity. So in resource mobilization, Duterte orders mobilization of government assets for the victims of Typhoon Odette. Manila to Malacanang on Sunday, said President Rodrigo Duterte has ordered the use of all government assets to expedite the delivery of relief and rehabilitation efforts in areas hit by the Typhoon Odette. Ang utos ng ating mahal na Pangulo, the President's directive is use all government resources to ensure that all goods are delivered as soon as possible, especially sa mga province like Surigao del Norte at sa Dinagat Islands. Acting Presidential Spokesperson Secretary Carlo said in an interview over DCBB. Nograles said Duterte designate Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD Secretary Rolando Bautista to act as crisis manager to ensure government response is coordinated in Surigao del Norte and Dinagat Island. Bautista will be assisted by National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council or NDRRMC Executive Director and Civil Defense Administrator under Secretary Ricardo Halad. So the two officials will be tasked to facilitate the delivery and transport of food and non-food items to affected areas, deliver tents, tarpaulins to these affected areas within 24 hours, and implement food for work and cash for work programs to aid typhoon victims as necessary. So as part of response efforts, Nograles said the Philippines Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard will send their boats and ships to augment the immediate delivery of needed supplies, equipment, and food in Surigao del Norte and Dinagat Islands. He said the BRP and ang Pangulo will likewise to be sent to the Dinagat Islands and Siargao to act as floating hospital as the typhoon damaged the hospital in these areas, and medical personnel need augmentation to treat the injured and those with medical needs. So the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Eastern Mindanao, committed to send medical teams on board the two Navy ships to augment the health personnel in Siargao and Dinagat Islands, he added. Nograles said the Department of Health has committed to send needed medical supplies and augment health personnel in the Dinagat Islands. The Maritime Industry Authority, for its part, will immediately assess the seaworthiness of vessels in Surigao del Norte and the Dinagat Islands to add more mobility in the delivery of food and supplies to these areas. So in southern Leyte, Nograles said Duterte ordered the Department of Agriculture to provide boats and seedlings to affected fisher folk and farmers. He likewise asked the National Housing Authority and the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development to provide necessary assistance to affected families who lost their houses or those whose houses were damaged. And also Duterte also instructed the Department of Energy to expedite the return of power to affected areas and the Department of Information and Communications Technology to immediately augment mobile cell sites to affected areas. So the NDRRMC said 125 areas and Mimaropa Region 7, 8, 10 and the BARMM are still experiencing communication outages. So the DSWD has been directed to ensure prompt and continuous distribution of relief goods to affected families. Help on the way. Meanwhile, Nograles and Duterte has pledged some 2 billion pesos worth of assistance to local governments of provinces hit by the typhoon. So on Sunday, the NDRRMC said 181,500 families residing in 2,209 barangays were affected by the onslaught of Typhoon Odette. Nograles assured individuals in provinces ravaged by the typhoon that helps is on the way. Ang mensahe ko na lang sa lahat ng mga naapektuhan ng Typhoon Odette, ginagawa po ng inyong pamamahalaan ang lahat ng ating babayan. My message to those affected by Typhoon Odette, the government is doing everything it can, Nograles said. In a press statement, he also appealed to the public to extend prayers to typhoon-hit communities. So, in addition to this, as the whole government act with dispatch to assist typhoon-affected areas and residents, we call on everyone to pray for those who perish, those who are still missing, and those who got injured for their swift recovery. Let us all extend kindness, generosity, and compassion to our kababayans who are in need, said. On Saturday, Duterte visited Siargao Island and Siargao del Norte, Dinagat Islands, and Maasin City in southern Leyte to personally assess the damage caused by Typhoon Odette. Despite admitting that the government funds are immensely depleted due to the COVID-19 pandemic, he assured that he is looking for funds for the aid. Plan implementation. So the plan implementation refers to the pace where actual and concrete implementation of tasks and activities are done. These activities and tasks are meant to comprise the specific intervention a community undertakes in solving problems or addressing an issue. So during this plan implementation or the implementation of the plan, several components are working simultaneously. Each activity constitutes a set of block of tasks with their respective assigned personnel and appropriate resources. This may range from a simple phone call to a government agency, a visit to a shop to buy supplies, to the settling of an appointment with a technical working group or physical arrangement for community event. Tasks may appear to be small marginal actions, but are very important in the completion of an activity. As scheduled tasks are completed, activities are set in motion towards the achievement of objectives. and ultimately goals. So plan implementation is one of the major source of our resource mobilization in community profiling. Next, we have monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring and evaluation complement each other. Monitoring focuses on the status and progress of tasks and activities in the course of implementation of the community action plan. Monitoring includes procedures that allow the tracking of the performance of project implementers and the effect of resources in completing tasks and activities. So on the other hand, evaluation is typically conducted in the middle and at the end of scheduled completion of community action plan to evaluate the effectivity and success of the project. So there are three types of evaluation, namely process evaluation, summative evaluation, and impact evaluation. Next, we have the process evaluation. It's periodically conducted, typically midway of a planned project or program. It allows communities to learn from the implementation process and make adjustments to ensure their strategy effectiveness. So it looks into how the community action plan has been implemented. It also examines the flow of bottlenecks in the implementation of task activities. As mentioned in the earlier section, plans are generally idealized methods of action. During the actual implementation, realities and contingencies surface, requiring immediate adjustments and resolution. So the process evaluation therefore also informs implementers about these needed adjustments. Next, we have problems and issues in community planning. So community action initiatives and community planning always comes with the problems and issues. These are several reasons and factors that can cause community action and planning to fail. So these factors may be innately present in the communities, or they may also be elements found outside the communities. For instance, some community members refuse to evolve or refuse to involve or to cooperate due to previous experiences in community planning. Others repeal the idea of community initiatives, thinking that collective action is problematic because these are individuals that free ride and take advantage of the goodwill and contribution of other members. So furthermore, resource constraints such as for example, the depletion of funds, the concentrations of control resources to a few individuals, or inaccessibility of tools and technologies necessary for successful completion of intervention have proven to create gaps and problems in the effectiveness of the community project. Politically, the division and faction in the leadership, the lack of coordination, inadequacy of competencies, and slow-moving bureaucratic procedures have also impeded the progress of community initiatives. So finally, we think about external factors such as the interference and meddling of local politicians, traditional elites, and the violent interventions of armed groups have constrained participation, volunteerism, and community actions. Next, we have the strength in community tackling COVID-19 recovery in the Philippines through community-driven development. So when COVID-19 hit the Philippines and the country began community quarantine in March 2020, the National Community-Driven Development Project, or NCDDP, was in its final phase of implementation. The project quickly triggered its disaster response operation that will support communities and with COVID-19 response and early recovery. The DROM allowed the communities to reallocate 24 million for this purpose, supporting around 631,000 households across 2,158 barangays. That includes communities in 156 of the poorest municipalities in May 2020 and the closing of the project in December 2020. So the NCDDP is delivering target support to many poor communities which are often located in remote areas and has achieved a 65% participation rate from the marginalized groups like women and indigenous peoples. To date, the project has mobilized around 1.89 million community volunteers, with women holding 63% of leadership positions in the community volunteer committees. So the DROM is a modality that adopts the community-driven development process to support community recovery in disaster-affected areas. So in the first 2 years of NCDDP, the DROM was tested in 554 municipalities affected by Typhoon Haiyan between 2014 and year 2016. Through the DROM, the project delivers larger block grants, allows for an extended menu of basic services and facilities, and has more flexible financial management and procurement procedures. So the mobilization of the DROM for COVID-19 allowed the program to respond to changing communities before the pandemic. The communities prioritized basic service sub-projects that build community infrastructures like access roads and drainage canals. In response to COVID-19, communities shifted their focus on establishing or upgrading isolation facilities in accordance with the Department of Health protocols, personal protective equipment, medical equipment, and improved water and sanitation facilities. Strength and community. Tackling COVID-19 recovery in the Philippines through community-driven development. So this blog describes how the Philippines Homeless People's Federation has responded to the health and economic impacts of COVID-19. The Federation has more than 9,000 members in 106 communities in 14 cities and towns throughout the Philippines. It brings together low-income community organizations to find solutions to problems relating to land, housing, income, infrastructure, health, and welfare. Its work is supported by the Philippine Action for Community Lead Shelter Initiatives, Incorporated. The blog draws on responses to a questionnaire conducted by Federation community leaders and a teleconference were experiences from the ground. Batasan, Cebu, Davao, Iloilo, Muntinlupa, NCR, Rodriguez, Rizal, and Valenzuela were shared. So in addition to this, planning the response In the initial plans from the Homeless People's Federation, leaders, local, regional, and national, included identifying the community's most vulnerable people and updating community databases with member information, deploying immediate intervention to help prevent the spread of the virus and minimize impacts of the lockdown, coordinating and partnering the government and non-government institutions, setting up a communication network to support member coordination across regions and cities. And since many banks were closed, supporting the transfer of funds to regions at the start of the lockdown, each region used their savings to finance their community operation. But this soon ran low. Community lead COVID-19 response, an update from the Philippines. So 1 year on, Rebecca Apeleras and Migo Gade provide an update on the action of the Homeless People's Federation of the Philippines in its fight against COVID-19, including cases or case studies of what has been done in the cities of Davao and Talisa. So the Philippines has been really slammed by the pandemic. Despite draconian government lockdowns in many cities, infections have mushroomed to 1.2 million cases, and so far 20,900 people have died. It has revealed enormous gaps in the country's systems of governments, economics, healthcare, and technology, and left many with no support. The hardest hit by the virus and by the effects of prolonged lockdown have been the urban poor. So let us now proceed to filling the gaps. So where top-down systems of relief have come up short, bottom-up shorts and grassroots organizations continue to fill some gaps and help people survive, as this flag on the Homeless People's Federation of the Philippines COVID-19 response described. HPFP and its partner Philippine Action for Community Lead Shelter Initiatives Incorporated continue their work to address many urgent needs in poor communities and cities around the country. Through its network of community-based savings groups and homeowners associations, the Federation has tackled problems of hunger, ill health, and loss of income by surveying and mapping vulnerable families and those with livelihood problems to understand who needs what, setting up community kitchens to cook nutritious meals for unemployed and vulnerable community members, and provide food delivery services, setting up hand and foot washing stations throughout the communities, and lastly, collaborating with local governments to use community-based health monitors to track infections and distribute aid and information.